ओके, थैंक यू, श्योर। तो स्टर्जन कैपिटल एक इन्वेस्टमेंट मैनेजमेंट कंपनी है, हेडक्वार्टर्ड आउट ऑफ लंदन, लेकिन दुनिया भर के अंदर um, हमारे कॉलीग्स वगैरह रहते हैं, और हम लोग दुनिया भर के अंदर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स करते हैं। जनरली जो इलाका है दुनिया का जहां हम लोगों को ज़्यादा नज़र आता है कि हमारी स्किल्स और हमारा एक जो व्यू है दुनिया के ऊपर, और स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम्स के ऊपर, वो वहाँ डेवलप ज़्यादा करता है। वो ये है कि um, जो सेंट्रल एशिया का इलाका है और साउथ एशिया का इलाका है, जनरली इन दो इलाकों के अंदर हम लोगों की एक स्ट्रांग प्रेजेंस है। हम लोग उनकी दो स्ट्रैटेजीज हैं। एक स्ट्रैटेजी प्राइवेट इक्विटी की स्ट्रैटेजी है, जो बेसिकली ज़्यादा थोड़ी लेटर स्टेज कंपनीज होती हैं उनके लिए होती है, और हम लोगों की अर्ली स्टेज कंपनीज के लिए वेंचर कैपिटल की स्ट्रैटेजी है। सॉरी, अजान हो रही है, तो I'll just take 30 seconds to wait it out। ओके जी, हाँ। तो बेसिकली जो हम लोगों का ज्योग्राफिक फोकस मैंने आपको बता दिया, मैंने आपको हम लोगों का स्टेज फोकस बता दिया। जनरली जो स्टेज वाइज फोकस है उसके अंदर वेंचर कैपिटल के अंदर वी हैव क्लोज टू अराउंड ऑल टुगेदर आई वुड से we're currently at around 48 million or so in assets under management, $48 million dollars. और फिर PE side के ऊपर we're at around $250 million dollars in assets under management. So altogether, we're close to 300 million in assets under management. यानी कि the amount of capital we manage and invest on behalf of our limited partners, जो basically हमारे investors होते हैं। अब जब when it comes to me, my focus has been entrepreneurship and investing for the last 10 years. Mera background has been around building companies, especially in the software sector. Specifically, I built a company in the mapping as a service sector in the US, raised $2.5 million for it, and then sold it in 2019 as well. And then also raised close to $4 million for a Pakistani payments company that I joined in 2019 as executive director. Called Fori. We were able to sell that to one of our cap table main investors on the cap table as well. And then beyond that, my background before I became a founder was generally in private equity, investing in very large companies, very large private companies, especially companies that were technology companies and emerging companies like, so if you remember Uber or DoorDash or Didi, some of those Series C, Series D rounds, I've invested in those. So over time, I've invested potentially in the last 10 years, close to $100 million, and raised close to around $10 to $12 million over um, that same period in companies that I was associated with. अब द अब जो चीज़ सबसे ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट होती है और लोग ये आपको बताते नहीं है, वो ये है कि इन्वेस्टर से कम्युनिकेशन कैसे करनी है। आई थिंक हर कोई पिच डेक्स बना लेता है, हर कोई अपनी स्टोरी और अपनी पिच थोड़ी सी रिफाइन करके बताता रहता है। लेकिन वो जो चीज़ें होती है ना, वो बेसिकली इंटरेस्ट जनरेट करने के लिए होती है। लेकिन जब आपको वाकई में एक बंदे को कन्विंस करना है, वो एक पीरियड ऑफ टाइम के ऊपर कन्विंस हो। कोई भी जो है इंस्टेंटली किसी भी चीज से कन्विंस नहीं हो सकता, राइट। आप सोचें, अगर आप दुनिया के सारे रिलीजन्स भी देख लें, हर चीज देख लें, तो लोगों को बहुत साल लगे एक फॉलोइंग बनाने के अंदर। कोई भी चीज आसानी से नहीं आती, और कंसिस्टेंसी और मेहनत इन्वेस्टर कम्युनिकेशंस के अंदर नंबर वन। कंसिस्टेंसी इज एक्चुअली द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग व्हेन इट कम्स टू इन्वेस्टर कम्युनिकेशन, क्योंकि इफ यू देखें, देयर टू थिंग्स। एक है कि आपने किसी से पैसे ले लिए, अब आप उसके उस पैसे के आप मुहाफिज हैं, आप उस पैसे के बेसिकली मुदारिब हैं। अब आप उस पैसे के जब मुदारिब हैं, तो आपको बेसिकली आपने किसी से पार्टनरशिप की है, राइट। अब वो जो पार्टनरशिप है उसके अंदर आपको दो तीन चीजें करनी पड़ेंगी उसको हक हलाल का पैसा बनाने। एक है कि आपको उसको वाइजली स्पेंड करना पड़ेगा। दूसरा है, आप क्योंकि एक अर्ली स्टेज कंपनी और आपको रिस्क लेने के लिए पैसे दिए, ये नहीं देने, आपको पैसे इसलिए नहीं दिए गए कि आप रिस्क नहीं लो। रिस्क आपको लेना है, लेकिन उस रिस्क के अंदर अगर जो आपकी सक्सेस है और आपका जो फेलियर है, उन दोनों चीजों को आपको कम्युनिकेट करना, ठीक है। यानी कि फेलियर को भी कम्युनिकेट करना पड़ता है इंसान को। जब आप कम्युनिकेट करते हो, फेलियर को लिखते हो उसको, और फिर आप दूसरों को बताते हो, तो फिर दूसरे आपको बताते हैं कि हाँ ठीक है, आपने यहाँ गलत किया था, यहाँ आपने सही किया था। आप लेकिन उससे सीख रहे हो, उस फेलियर से। आई थिंक पाकिस्तान के अंदर नंबर वन जो चीज जो बहुत एक मुझे खलती है, वो ये है कि यहाँ माँ बाप कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं देते अपने बच्चों को गलती करने के लिए। कोई अगर बच्चा गलती करता है तो उसको कहते हैं कि ये तुमने गलती की। जब आप ये एटीट्यूड रखेंगे तो आप हमेशा ही ऐसे लोगों को सोसाइटी के अंदर लेके आएंगे जो अपनी गलतियां मानने को तैयार नहीं है, और अपनी गलतियों को एक्सेप्ट करने को तैयार नहीं, और अपनी गलतियों को बताने को भी तैयार नहीं। और ऐसा माशरा बेसिकली कभी भी फंक्शनली काम नहीं करता, क्योंकि लोग उसके अंदर अपने आप को कभी भी, वो कभी सीखते ही नहीं है अपनी गलतियों से, क्योंकि वो अपनी गलतियों को हमेशा एक बहुत ही बड़ा अजाब समझते हैं अपने ऊपर। और गलतियां कोई अजाब, तो नंबर वन चीज एक्चुअली, तो जो सबसे ज्यादा चीज स्टार्टअप्स के अंदर और स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम्स दुनिया भर के अंदर जो वाकई में कन्विंस करती है ना कि आपके अंदर है कुछ आगे लेके जाने का, वो ये है क्या आप गलती कर सकते हैं, और क्या आप गलती को समझ सकते हैं, और क्या आप गलती से फिर आगे बढ़ सकते हैं। जिस बंदे ने इस चीज को, या बंदी ने इस चीज को, एक इस चीज के ऊपर कमांड लेके आ गए ना आप, तो देन नथिंग कैन स्टॉप, नथिंग, जीरो, देयर इज नो चांस कि आप इवेंचुअली यू विल succeed. Even if you fail 100 times, you will eventually succeed. एक बहुत अच्छी स्टोरी है, जो मैंने, स्टोरी तो नहीं है, it's a life experience like that I heard from somebody else that I know. उस बंदे ने 39 कंपनी स्टार्ट की, एंड 39 कंपनीज के अंदर ही फेल। इट टुक हिम till the age of 40 to start his 40th company. So think about the number of companies he started already, right? The company he started at that time was, ये आपने ई सिगरेट्स देखे होंगे, राइट? तो बेसिकली व्हाट ही डिड इज लाइक, ही जब शुरू हो रहे थे ई सिगरेट्स, तो ही बिकेम वन ऑफ द लार्जेस्ट डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स ऑफ ई सिगरेट्स अराउंड। और उसने कैसे किया? क्योंकि ही हैड लर्न फ्रॉम ऑल ऑफ हिज मिस्टेक्स इन द 39 कंपनीज दैट ही फेल्ड इन। So he understood that there's no substitute for going and meeting the customer face to face. And guerrilla marketing is so important. तो उसने जो अपनी 40th कंपनी की, वो उसने जो है बेसिकली सबसे कम पैसे स्पेंड किए, and he was able, you know what his company's worth in terms of revenue just today? That company does close to $150 million in revenue with zero investors. So he owns 100% of the company. The number one thing he learned to do, though, was that he learned to understand where his failures were, right? And he learned how to effectively work through those failures, right? And even though so the number one thing for you to learn over time is there will be things that you need investors for. There will be things that you don't need investors for. लेकिन फेलियर को recognize करना, फेलियर को लिखना, और फिर फेलियर के ऊपर एक खुद से अपने आप की तवज्जो लेके आना कि आपने कहाँ क्या चीज सही की थी, और कहाँ क्या चीज आपने
फायदा
गलत
करो,
की।
1 1.5 घंटा जो करना है वो करो, बैठो लेके बैठ जाओ।
That is the most important thing, right? Kyunki that will be a skill that you can take forward regardless of if you ever get investors in your company or not, right? So here's how I would always, so here's the 4 or 5, I'll give you 4 or 5 principles, right? Around how to effectively communicate with investors. I'd like you guys to ask me as many questions as possible on each of those principles. So I'll give, a minute to 2 minutes for questions after each principle, right? Because I just want everyone to understand. I don't want everyone to kind of like go in the end and then give a Q&A. Let's just talk about each principle and then go forward, right? I think we have enough time to do that. So, number one principle, consistency of communication. Have you defined a monthly date time at which you send investor communication? Forget about content. It's just about, have you put it in your schedule? कि मुझे इस टाइम के ऊपर on the first Monday of the second week in every month, I will provide an update of the last month to an investor I have or to an investor I want, right? If you haven't done that, then that's the first thing we have to kind of address, right? Do you have any questions around consistency? Right? It's a very self-explanatory thing, but if you have any questions, like how many times a month should we be sending investor updates? You should be sending it once a month. Nobody wants you to send it twice a month. People don't have the bandwidth to read it twice a month. And also, if you're not able to tell an investor everything that you need to tell them within one email in 1 month, it's really then, you're not being concise enough and your clarity of vision is being questioned, right? How clear are you around seeing the problem? How clear are you around reading the market? If you're not clear enough to send it over in a once a month fashion, then you can't really do it. Now, the only exception would be if somehow or the other you have discovered something within the market, within how you're approaching the market that has basically helped you grow beyond anything that you've seen in the last 2 months, 3 months, right? At that point of time, you can always send like a special update. Hey, this is what we've been able to see and do. We would love your support in being able to grow this faster. And that's a great opportunity to ask for money or to ask for effectively help, right? Or to ask for connections, partnerships, etc., right? If it's something that is super urgent, right? If there's an urgency involved and there's a tangible benefit to the update, then that is an update you should send regardless of your normal, everyday, consistent update that you send every month, right? Okay, so after consistency, it's content. Here's what. So everyone has differing views on content, what you need to send and what you don't need to send. I actually have a very simple understanding of content. For me, content is about three things. One is always going to be about what did you do this month that's different from last month? What are some things that you are measuring in your business? What are your North Star metrics, for example? Is it the number of users that you've been able to onload, the number of people you've talked to, um, the number of referrals your product has had in the month, the amount of money you've made, if you're a later stage, if you're a little bit, um, if you've already got revenue, if you're post revenue, then you should be talking about your revenue a little bit. उसके अलावा क्या आपने कौन सी चीजें ऐसी हुई हैं जहां you can learn from, right? What are the mistakes you made, for example? How have you learned from those mistakes? How are you addressing those mistakes, right? And then at the end, you have to talk about what do you need from your investors? Very simple, right? What did you do that's different from last month? What are your operating metrics? What are your North Star metrics? How have they changed relative to last month? Where is it that you made mistakes? Where is it that you had success? What are your initiatives to fix those mistakes? What are your initiatives to compound that success? And then lastly, what do you need from your investors? Is it more capital? Is it help? And if you just do that, it's pretty simple. It's not like, and today, like you guys you have LLMs, you have everything, you have resources, go to Y Combinator, check everything, right? They'll give you lots of great like investor update templates, etc. as well. And they're not bad, to be honest. Just make sure that they match your business. Any questions on content?
Yes, Saad, I have a question.
Mhm.
So you talked about mentioning mistakes, learnings. Mainly, we
Hmm.
call them learnings. We either learn or we either grow. There are only two
Hmm.
ways to progress. But when it comes to learnings, and we are connected with some investor. Let's say I come to an XYZ investor and say, hi, this is what I have done so far,
Hmm.
and this is what is a list of mistakes or the learnings that I have done so far. So, how do you think the investors take it? Every investor is not as open-minded as you. People uh, comparatively just don't want to listen to bad things. Investor is only invested in is like more concerned about growing his money flawlessly or with minimum flaws. But if I go and share my content, that see, this is what I'm doing, this is what my mistakes are, So you'll be cautious in the very first place. So how do you think that would work?
I think it's a function. So think of it in this way. जब आप शादी करते हैं, जिससे आप शादी करते हैं, अगर आप उसको ये नहीं बताएं कि you're an alcoholic or something, do you think that marriage will last for a very long time? Simple question. It's about long-term alignment, right? देखिए, अगर इन्वेस्टर के पैसे जाने तो वो तो वैसे ही जाने हैं ना, वो आप अभी चले जाएं या 10 साल बाद चले जाएं। लेकिन अब अगर आपकी अलाइनमेंट ये है ही नहीं कि जिस बंदे से, because having an investor on your cap table is getting married to somebody, right? Now, if the investor is under the number of companies that I have known that have failed because of this rhetoric. Okay, you bring on an investor into the cap table and you do it under a false pretense. Number one, this is actually something illegal because this is called, it's you haven't disclosed everything to the person, right? Disclosure requirements होती हैं when you raise money from somebody. Number two, you're just not going to have a very good relationship with somebody that doesn't understand that at early stage you need to be making mistakes, right? Like, look, if that person is a real investor, the kind of investor you're bringing in, potentially they've never actually done their own business or they've inherited somebody's business. They're not a self-made person. Like, effectively, anyone who's built their own business knows that they've made a lot of mistakes before they were able to. There's no such thing as flawless execution. If execution was flawless, I'll tell you this, then you wouldn't need capital because you would find ways to do things without capital. That is actually flawless execution, right? So their money is not going to be the last money that comes in. Their money will effectively, the only thing you can really do is go to an investor and tell them, look, these are the kind of mistakes, these are the kind of learnings we've made, right? These learnings are effectively X, Y, and Z. This is how they help in addressing the business model to be better today than it was yesterday. This is how we've learned that the market responds to X, not Y. And then C, fundamentally, because I've made these mistakes, I will no longer make them with your money. And that's the benefit of disclosing your mistakes, is because you're telling an investor, hey, these are the things we figured out. And now your capital's going in once these things are figured out, which means your capital is actually much more de-risked than it would be making these mistakes. And these are all major mistakes we've made. So when you go to an investor, generally you go to investors once you've made the major mistakes or the major learnings have been processed, right? So investor के पास जाते कब हैं? जब when you feel the product has reached a state where it's stable, where you have some level of early product market fit. Early product market fit का मतलब ये भी होता है कि you know how to monetize the product early on as well. The customer is willing to pay something for it. And that it is a high margin enough product that you can, if you sell enough of it, you will be able to survive. Or that it doesn't cost you so much that you will go bankrupt. That your cash flows will just completely disappear selling the product, right? So if you're going to an angel, if you're so honestly, like there's a big issue in the ecosystem where we don't have enough people who understand how to actually invest, but we also have an issue around founders not being able to communicate why mistakes are important. Okay. So yes, you will have a lot of people who don't, but by the way, if you go to a Memon Seth and you tell him कि यार मैंने ये जो है ना भंड मारे थे, अब ये जो भंड मारे थे ना, अब नहीं मारूंगा मैं क्योंकि मुझे समझ आ गया है। क्योंकि जो मेमन सेठ है वो बताओ बाय द वे, वो सीखता किससे है? किसी और के पैसे से। इसलिए आप
Agreed.
जब मेमन के पास जाओगे और उसको कहोगे कि यार भाई साहब यार मुझे इतने पैसे चाहिए, ये मैंने भंड मारे थे, अब मुझे आ गया इसको इस काम को जो है धंधे को करने का, आप मुझे इतने दे दो, मैं इतने बना के आपको दे दूँ, सीधा सीधा कहेगा कि ये दो। क्योंकि उसको भी पता है कि उसने भी भंड मारे हैं। आप किसी वर्किंग प्रोफेशनल के पास जाओगे और कहोगे कि यार मुझे इतने पैसे चाहिए, वो कहेगा ये मुझे बताओ तुम्हारा अच्छा ठीक है, और आप उसको कहोगे यार मैंने ये भंड मारे हुए हैं इसके अंदर, सुनो अच्छा वाह, अच्छा ये मारे हुए हैं, ओ यार ये वापस भी मार सकते होगे तुम। वो ये नहीं सोच रहा है, उसको उसके अंदर ये नहीं है क्योंकि ओनरशिप नहीं है ना। एक जगह है कि एक बंदा अपने बिजनेस की ओनरशिप रखता है, उसको पता है कि अगर मेरे पैसे ऑन द लाइन हैं, अब मैं वापस से वो वाला भंड नहीं मारूं। जब आप एक कंपनी में काम करते हो, आप तो ये देख रहे हो ना, मैंने कंपनी के पैसों के ऊपर भंड मारा है, और
Agreed.
कंपनी तो अब्सॉर्ब कर सकती है। तो वो एक मेंटालिटी इज डिफरेंट। यू हैव टू टारगेट द राइट टाइप ऑफ इन्वेस्टर। Go for somebody who's done a karobar before. Don't go for somebody who's a professional. Don't know how to invest. 90% of professionals in Pakistan are too risk averse. उनको आप फिक्स डिपॉजिट में डाल दो, वो वहीं खुश रहेंगे। वो
Agreed.
स्टॉक मार्केट तक के अंदर नहीं डालते, आपके अंदर क्यों डालेंगे यार?
Agreed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So think about content. Content is important because what you're actually telling people is कि यार मुझे आता है भंड मारना, तो मुझे भंड मार के ये काम भी आता है। ये
Agreed.
पॉइंट अगर नहीं करोगे तो फिर ठीक है। अगर if you don't learn, then you don't deserve any more money. You don't deserve to do this business anymore. Go find something that's easier to do, right? खत्म।
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the third principle is very simple, right? So we've done consistency, we've done content. The third is actually urgency. So content के अंदर आपने you talked about what you need to present. Urgency is how quickly, how much, with what level of confidence can you communicate to people that you need something now? Because the whole point of doing an investor update is to be able to do two things. One, either tap into the investor's capital base, or B, tap into the investor's network. If you're doing investor updates, is because your business needs additional help, either from a networking perspective or effectively from a cash requirement perspective. Now, so the urgency that you have to develop is the following. Once you communicate consistently and then with the right content, you have to measure how many people actually read your content, how many people reply to your content. What are some people that you have effectively, do you have a process where you've gone like, यार ये जो मेरे पास 10 इन्वेस्टर हैं मेरी लिस्ट के ऊपर, उनके अंदर से ये जो 5 है ना, these are really useful to me right now. वो जो 5 इन्वेस्टर्स हैं, वहां आप urgency कैसे डेवलप करो? It's actually very simple. You do a follow on email or a WhatsApp or whatnot. You go like, yeah, have you talked? Have you read my investor update? The way to create a conversation is to simply ask a question. So you sent an email, you ask people, hey, did you read my email or not? That creates a conversation. Now, if the person hasn't read the email, they will now read it because you've asked them. Number two, the second ask you're going to do is like, yeah, I think you are an ideal person for me to get a little bit of help from. Can you just, you don't have to invest anything, you don't have to refer me to anyone. Can I just take 30 minutes to get feedback from you, right? So now urgency creates agency, right? That's effectively. What does agency mean? Agency means that you are basically, when you are being urgent in your communication, you are also driving towards an outcome where the person that you're talking to will feel like there's a level of agency that you're developing with them. Okay. Now, if you are developing that agency, what that means is that you're making the other person feel useful, right? So if you make your investor base feel useful, what do you think they're going to do? जब आपको कोई जाता है और कहता है कि यार आप मुझे ये चीज बताएं, आपका ये एक्सपीरियंस है, तो आपको लगता है कि आपने अपना कोई कंट्रीब्यूशन किया है किसी की चीज के अंदर, कि you were part of the building process, right? आपने एक जो घर बना रहा है बंदा, उसके अंदर आपने भी एक ईंट लगाई है, right? When you get somebody to provide feedback to you, what actually happens is that that person becomes emotionally connected or psychologically connected to your project. And that is when you can then ask for more things. And as you ask for more things and more things and more things, what normally happens is that after 3 or 4 times where you go like, yeah, your contribution's been very helpful over like every time that I've talked to you, eventually the person is going to feel like, well, you know what? I think I've created a lot of utility for this person, and he's building something with a lot of my input. I feel like I'm part of this Now, how do I become a shareholder as well, right? So you feel like a stakeholder, and the evolution from stakeholder to shareholder is much simpler than going directly to shareholder. That's the concept you have to understand around urgency, right? So urgency creates that ability to make people go from just somebody that's on a list to somebody who's a stakeholder to somebody that's a shareholder, right? And urgency is good is really about momentum, right? Investor communication is about momentum. You have to constantly communicate momentum. And when you communicate momentum and when you keep sort of working hard, and it's hard, of course, like talking to somebody who might not understand your business completely, but talking to them over and over again will definitely help them understand. It's not always correct to think that somebody who gets your business instantly is a better long-term partner than somebody who understands it a bit slower than the person that who gets it, right? Warren Buffett says a very simple thing, right? As an investor, you have to, and as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you have to look at Warren Buffett a little bit. And one thing he says is that um, in the investing business, you don't have to have 170 ka IQ. You need just 120 ka IQ. Why? Because 120 ka IQ ke upar, you just have to be directionally correct. Okay, are you looking at things that are moving in the right direction or not, right? Or are you looking at things which are moving in the direction you are looking, right? Now, somebody who has 170 IQ may not be a good investor because they don't have the capacity to potentially act on their conviction. It's paralysis by analysis if you have 170 IQ at times. That's why you see a lot of university professors don't become entrepreneurs because they don't understand the first rule of entrepreneurship, which is you have to keep moving forward and moving forward at speed because the faster you learn, the better you get. Why is it that why is it that OpenAI and chat and LLMs and Gemini and all of these sort of things are effectively becoming better and better? Well, because they want to move fast. They want increased adoption because the faster they move, the more mistakes they make and the better they learn. But that's the whole point of entrepreneurship. Like the person who's just going to be stuck evaluating vision and strategy, they will never be able to really do anything, right? Because you have to get into the trenches. You have to, forward momentum is everything, right? And so that's why I talk about urgency. Urgency is the number one thing you can leverage, right? Consistency, content, and urgency, right? How do you become consistent? Consistency and content effectively lead to clarity of vision, right? So this is a question we have as well around if your numbers are not great, how do you communicate, right? Well, if your numbers are not great, then show your clarity of vision, which is through consistency and content, which means that regardless of your numbers, what you're really trying to understand is proving to people you're taking the right actions, you're putting in the right amount of work, you're looking in the right places, you're trying to solve problems in the most optimal way possible, even if things are not scalable at this point of time, you are learning a lot from what you're already doing, right? That is what actually clarity of vision entails, is that as you are making an action every day is informing a better clarity of vision to you, right? What it showcases is that you start with a vision which is very hodgepodge, let's say, right? वो पता नहीं है यार ये मार्केट है मुझे इसके अंदर ये करना है ये मेरा मिशन है ये है वो है राइट लेकिन ऑनेस्टली आपको पता है कि यार एक ये इस चीज के अंदर प्रॉब्लम है इस प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व कर रहा हूँ मैं अब मुझे पता नहीं है कि हाउ डू आई सॉल्व दिस प्रॉब्लम and even if I do solve this problem, what effect this will have on society. I don't know everything about it when I start, right? But as I do things to validate my hypothesis or my thesis around a problem, कि अगर मैं इसको ऐसे solve करूंगा और ऐसे एक product में बनाऊंगा और ऐसे customer को बेचूंगा, तो the customer is going to find utility from this product. They're going to be able to solve their problem X, Y, or Z. And then this will allow me to find more customers because I'll have happy customers that keep paying me money and more money equals more distribution for me. Khatam, right? That's effectively what we do as entrepreneurs. By the way, it's not anything uh, more than that. Everyone thinks it is. It's not. It's Find a product that solves the problem. Either you build it or you buy it. Then orchestrate the system around it, and then create a clarity of vision around how you need to approach this problem in the moment you're approaching it, right? Your vision, your clarity of vision may change over time, but it only so अगर हम लोग क्वेश्चन वापस से देखें तो I believe it was something along the lines of how do I look at the questions here?
तो ये चैट में अगर आप
चैट में
आएंगे
होगा
ना,
ना?
चैट,
हाँ,
हाँ, मैं आपको
नहीं नहीं, मुझे
रीड कर
नजर आ
देता
गया, got it, got it.
हूँ।
हेलो सर, आई एम राम बतानी सर। मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि जब नंबर्स वीक हों और विजन स्ट्रांग, तब फाउंडर इन्वेस्टर को कैसे फील कराए कि ये रिस्क लेना चाहिए। अच्छा ठीक, समझ आ गया मुझे। यार देखिए, जैसे मैंने बताया कि एक इन्वेस्टर को आप जो ना एक मीटिंग के अंदर कभी भी कन्विंस नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन आप ये जरूर बता सकते हैं कि यार ये प्रॉब्लम बहुत बड़ी है। इस प्रॉब्लम के अंदर बहुत ज्यादा लोगों को नुकसान होता है। उस नुकसान को डिफाइन करें, उस प्रॉब्लम को डिफाइन करें। विजन को हट जाए विजन से, नंबर से हट जाए, हर चीज से हट जाए। लोग एक्साइटेड होते हैं एज एन इन्वेस्टर टू फिगर आउट इफ अ प्रॉब्लम इज हार्ड इनफ टू सॉल्व, राइट? देखो, अगर ऐसी चीज है जहां मुझे बेसिकली एक परफ्यूम की बॉटल एक वेयरहाउस से 1 किलोमीटर आगे डिलीवर करनी हो किसी दुकान को, दैट्स नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम, राइट? वो तो मैं चल के भी कर सकता हूँ 1 किलोमीटर। लेकिन अगर आप मुझे ये बताओ कि मुझे 10,000 बॉटल्स 1 घंटे में डिलीवर करनी है एक दुकान को 50 किलोमीटर आगे, नाउ दैट प्रॉब्लम इज मोर कॉम्प्लेक्स. हाउ मेनी ट्रक्स वुड यू नीड, व्हाट स्पीड दे वुड नीड टू गो एट, व्हाट राउट दे नीड टू टेक. So there's a complexity in that problem set, right? तो जो भी चीज आप सॉल्व कर रहे हो, जिस प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व कर रहे हो, first you have to define what that problem is. And if you can define that problem really well to an investor, that is when people will get excited. क्योंकि वो कहेंगे यार वाकई में ये एक बहुत बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है सोसाइटी के अंदर, राइट? ये बहुत बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है जो आप सॉल्व कर रहे हो, ये बहुत सारों लोगों के पास ये प्रॉब्लम है, राइट? आप फिर वो जो है ना, वो फिर आपसे पूछेगा अच्छा आपका इसका सोल्यूशन क्या है, राइट? देखिए उसने, लेकिन आप यू नीड टू गेट देम टू आस्क यू व्हाट योर सोल्यूशन इज. डोंट टेल पीपल योर सोल्यूशन अप फ्रंट. दैट्स द नंबर वन इशू पीपल हैव. इसके वो विजन बहुत बड़ा रखते हैं, लेकिन उनको ये नहीं पता कि पहले प्रॉब्लम बतानी होती है किसी को, फिर उसके बाद अपना सोल्यूशन पेश करना होता है. ये तो ऐसा हो गया कि जो मैंने आपसे पूछा नहीं कि आप क्या करोगे, लेकिन आपने मुझे पहले से बता दिया कि जो है भाई जी ये होगा, यही है, बस खत्म, कुछ नहीं हो सकता. और आपने पहले ही बता दिया कि यार आप तो कोई फ्लेक्सिबल बंदे हो ही नहीं, आपको तो लगता है कि आप ही दुनिया के सबसे बड़े लाइक आर्किमिडीज बने हुए हैं, एल्बर्ट आइंस्टाइन पता नहीं यहाँ आप पैदा होके आ गए हो. बगैर बगैर एल्बर्ट आइंस्टाइन की एजुकेशन के और बगैर एल्बर्ट आइंस्टाइन की जो है थ्योरी ऑफ रिलेटिविटी आपने बनाई नहीं है, और आप बोल रहे हो कि आप इस प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व कर लोगे, खत्म. तो नंबर वन थिंग इज talk about the problem, talk about yourself. Why are you equipped to deal with the problem, right? If you're not equipped to deal with the problem, who is it in your team that you've brought? And as a combination, how are you able to deal with the problem, right? तो ये जो है ना, ये आपको बेसिकली करना पड़ेगा. नंबर वन, आपको जो है अपनी प्रॉब्लम वेल डिफाइन करें. नंबर टू, अपनी खुद की एबिलिटी डिफाइन करें. नंबर टू, अगर आपकी खुद की एबिलिटी पूरी प्रॉब्लम को नहीं सॉल्व कर सकती, आप बताएं कि ये मेरे टीम मेंबर्स हैं जो मैं जिनको मैंने कन्विंस किया है इस प्रॉब्लम के बारे में, इसलिए वो मेरे साथ टीम मेंबर आए ना. देखो, द नंबर वन थिंग इज कि अगर आप एक टीम अपने साथ लोगों को कन्विंस कर सकते हैं कि यार तुम मेरे साथ आओ और इस प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करो, तो भाई अगर आप किसी और इंसान को जो है इतने बड़ी स्टेप के ऊपर लेके आ सकते हैं, तो फिर यू कैन ऑल्सो कन्विंस एन इन्वेस्टर with the same logic, right? कि भाई why are you solving what you're solving for, right? Why is it personally good to solve, right? ठीक है. Now we have like just one more principle, right? So we talked about consistency, content, and urgency. The third concept is always going to be monetization. ठीक है. And so we talked about urgency, creating this effect where people become stakeholders, and then from stakeholders they become shareholders. Well, monetization is that process, right? So urgency creates that starting point, but the real sort of monetization is when when your stakeholder becomes your shareholder. How do you make a stakeholder your shareholder, right? How do you get an investor to become a shareholder? Well, it's actually, if you've done the first three concepts well, the last one is actually relatively simpler to do. So monetization involves two things here, right? Once a person is somebody that you are comfortable with, that you feel like they can be somebody that you can rely on, that they're honest with you, that they have an understanding of your business that most people don't. At that point of time, the onus is for you to actually ask. This is something that people don't do enough. They don't ask enough. Thora, so you have to be shameless as the founder and you have to keep asking. But you have to time when you ask, right? Just as a good salesperson, by the way, a good salesperson is somebody who sells you a lot of stuff on a discount, and then one day you come into a shop and they ask you, and then they sell you something that you never thought you would ever buy from that person. And you go like, oh man, I might have saved like 10 rupees for the 100 times that I've gone to this shop. Sure, I've saved like 1,000 rupees, but he just made me buy something that's 5,000 rupees. That's actually a good salesperson. He's like, okay, yeah, I'll keep giving you 10 rupees off for 100 times that you come to my shop. But the 101st time is when I'll ask you, sir, why don't you buy this? This looks great on you. You'll be like, how much is it? You'll be like 5,000 rupees. You'll be like, यार मैं 100 दफा इसके पास आ चुका हूँ, उसने मुझे हर दफा ये डिस्काउंट दिया, आपके दिमाग के अंदर ये हो रहा होगा, और वो उस वक्त कहे नहीं नहीं, you look so great in this fair, I've never told you to buy anything that doesn't look good on you, right? I've always told you, okay, buy whatever is economical for you. Today, I'm telling you, this is something you need to buy because it looks so good on you. You've come to me 100 times. Have I ever told you to buy something great? And you'll be like, हाँ बात तो सही है, 100 दफा आ चुका हूँ, कुछ भी नहीं कहा इसने मुझे, अब कह रहा है. So then you go like, okay, यार कर लेते हैं यार, अब कोई बात नहीं. कभी कभार कर लेना चाहिए. Yeah, so that's a great salesperson. Somebody who understands that you have to invest in the relationship and then understands when to ask. That when they understand that the person is now much more inclined to act, right? So monetization is basically a function of, do you feel like somebody is comfortable enough with you now, or you're comfortable enough with them that you can ask them something, right? You can be like, yeah, you've been working with me for the past 6 months. You've been working with me for the past 3 months. Some people may be more comfortable in 6 months. Some people may be more comfortable in 3 months. Some people are more comfortable in like 2 weeks. I'm not kidding. Like, I've had lots of investors who I've met in 3 weeks. They've been like, Saad, I love working with you. I want to. It happens. Why though? But again, because I'm consistent in communicating with them. I'm consistent in telling them the right things. I'm consistent in being urgent around using their time. I make them feel like they're part of the process, right? Urgency creates that agency, right? That you are making somebody feel like they're on a rocket ship, right? And then the fourth, monetization happens when they feel like they're on a rocket ship, they're more likely to become a stakeholder. And then when they're a stakeholder, they become a shareholder. And that's monetization, right? So finding that timing is what's really important. And a lot of people won't tell you, okay, it's not about process. Sometimes it's just about timing, right? Aapko, like the best comedians are the ones, or the best salespersons are people who have great timing. They tell a joke and they know exactly when to time that. What time के एक उन्होंने पूरा सेट डेवलप करते हैं, राइट? अनवर मकसूद साहब पूरा एक सेट डेवलप करते हैं अपना, वो जो है आखिर के अंदर फिर वो एकदम से एक लाइन बोलते हैं और फिर आप हर कोई जो हंसने लग जाता है. क्यों? क्योंकि उन्होंने पूरा जो एक डेवलप किया ना, स्टोरी डेवलप की, पूरा जो है आपको एक मेंटल स्टेट के अंदर लेके आए कि आप वो अब्सॉर्ब कर सकें उस जोक को बहुत तेजी से. नाउ इट्स द सेम थिंग फॉर अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल. आप अनवर मकसूद कर लें, डेव शपेल कर लें, comedians, like honestly, no one will give you this advice, but I tell you, like, go on Netflix and watch a lot of comedians. Netflix हो गया, YouTube हो गया, जहां भी आपको देखना है, उर्दू के अंदर देखना है, इंग्लिश के अंदर देखना है, आप लोगों जो comedians होते हैं ना, उनकी आप टाइमिंग स्टडी करो. If you want to become a great salesperson, learn how to use humor first, right? क्योंकि humor is what connects people together, and sales is about connection. Raising money is about connection. When you are raising money from someone, you are selling your brand, you are selling your vision, you're selling your product, you're selling your capacity to make something of yourself, right? And so monetization is all about timing. Learn how to time it enough. Now, do you guys have any questions around what specific indicators you can see in somebody, for example, when you should time it? Very simple formula, by the way, for that is how many times are they reaching out to you? So measure in your head how many times you reached out to them. And then when they start reaching out to you on their own, that is normally a very good time to bring this up. You know, in the first month or two, you'll see that you've been reaching out to them exclusively for their time. Eventually, what happens is that flip where they start going like, yeah, let's do a follow-up on this thing that we were talking about. The moment they initiate a conversation with you on your business, that is when you know you've got. So pattern recognition and timing is very important, right? Knowing your audience is very important, right? That's why I'm saying learn how comedians actually develop their ability to read the room. Reading a room is very important. So that's sort of like so those are the four principles that I'll leave you with at this point in time, right? If you guys can get those four principles up and running in your investor communications process, I think you guys will do very well. All right, I think we're done with this session. I think I've got to head out now. Do you guys have NIC Hyderabad anything? Anyone has any closing questions? Happy to answer those. But yeah, I can give another 1 or 2 minutes and then I've got to head out.
Well, I have made a lot of notes, so I'll be keeping on revising them and organizing them. So thank you so much for that.
No worries.
जी हम क्वेश्चन आंसर पे
हाँ जी हो गया. I think everyone's sort of done at this point in time.
चले फर्दर भी अगर मतलब क्यूरी हो तो आपके साथ मतलब लिंक्डइन पे कनेक्ट हो सकते हैं साथ
Yeah, anyone can connect on LinkedIn or something like that. You guys can always, if anyone has like any sort, if you guys can get everyone's sort of, if anyone wants to do a follow-up session, I'm happy to do a follow-up session where it's just going to be Q&A, not about the principles, but like if they need like, you know, it doesn't have to be one-on-one, it can be a group-based sort of thing where everyone can try these principles first in their process, then come back to me on like where they feel like it's working or not working, right? Again, feedback loops are important, right? So I'm happy to provide that feedback loop, but take a month, apply these principles and see if they work or not before you come back. And then we'll figure out if you're applying them correctly or incorrectly, right? But that's the whole point.
That's a great offer. I guess startups के लिए तो बहुत अच्छा है
Mhm.
कि before going to investor एक experts feedback जरूर लीजिए और usually feedbacks के through ही अपनी improve करते हैं अदरवाइज अगर आप फीडबैक लेने के लिए रेडी नहीं है तो डेफिनेटली आपके लिए मुश्किल हो जाएगा
Any simple cheese. Look, just make sure that you're learning as much as possible. That's it. That's all you have to do, right? Or kuch nahi karna aapko. You just have to keep learning from your mistakes. It's the number one thing. That's why I started and I spent a lot of time on understanding why it's important to acknowledge your mistakes and to learn from them. It's because this process, when you're raising money, dealing with investors is the hardest thing in the world for most people. Raising money is the hardest thing. Like, I honestly, for me, investing money is not difficult. Like, I have enough experience and I know enough about technology to understand what works, what doesn't, when somebody has it and when somebody doesn't. But when I have to go and raise money from my own help, you know, that is the hardest thing because you are trying to convince people of your strategy. That's it. Right. And so I do this every day, right? I raise money every day. I'm talking to every day I'm talking to somebody who's interested in my strategy, pretty much.
So that's great. Thank you very much, Saad.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Jazakallah. And फिर इंशाल्लाह फॉलोअप के लिए साहब ने पहले आप लोगों को बोल दिया है थैंक यू जज़ाकल्लाह अस्सलाम वालेकुम
Okay.
अल्लाह हाफिज़
Thank you so much.
थैंक यू फॉर जॉइनिंग साहब सलमान अल्लाह हाफिज़